All right, then. It's so good to be joined by the man, Daniel Bryan, who today and on the Kickoff Show the other day is sporting what can only be described as, I think, a fashionable haircut.
Is it fashionable? I don't really know. So it's really interesting because I was in this process. My favorite haircut that I've ever had was when I was the Planet's champion, and it was like perfect for me. It's grungy looking. So I was trying to grow it back out after the Fiend had ripped my hair out last year, right? So trying to grow it back out, but it was still in this like really like shaggy, not looking good period, and it was going to take at least another 6 months to look good. And so I kind of went to my wife. I went to Bree, and I said like, hey, I've been thinking maybe I should like get a haircut so that I look nicer for TV, because it's going to take at least like 6 months or whatever. And it wasn't even a half a heartbeat. And she goes, yes. And you know what? I have some ideas. And then she's like, as if she's been fantasizing about me getting a better haircut for years. And so she's like, what about this? And it was like, it looked like a European like rugby player or something like that. She goes, yeah, what about this? I really like this. And I was like, oh, okay. As if she had that image saved on her phone. And so then I take it into the barber and I said, hey, yeah, can you do this? And he goes, for sure. And he did it. And here we are. I've got a new haircut. And some of the people backstage, one of the people that I've known for a long time, he said, are you cool now? I said, no, I'm too old to be cool. And like, just getting a new haircut does not make me any cooler than I've been before.
I mean, at least the barber did it, because the way the story was going, I thought not only did Bree have the European rugby player on the phone, but I thought she had the clippers ready to do it.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, I don't think she even trusts herself to do something like that.
So Daniel, the comeback feels like a lifetime ago now. Does life in WWE and everything, despite the fact it's obviously the weirdest year that's ever existed in WWE, does it somehow feel a bit more normal being back there again?
It's interesting. I do think so. Like, wrestling just feels like a normal part of my life. And one of the things that's I've really appreciated since I've come back is I was worried, because the first like 6 months, I was like, I didn't take anything for granted, right? I just loved it. Like, I'm in here loving it, right? And I was worried that feeling would kind of go away, and it hasn't. And it's really fun because like in the pandemic, I hate to say this, in the pandemic, like a lot of people are like, wrestling in front of no people, like this is a real buzzkill from a performer standpoint. I loved it. Our shows at the Performance Center where there's no piped in noise and there's no people was like so invigorating to me. I was like, whoa, like, because there's so many things that don't apply anymore, and so many things that like you could do that you could never do in front of a live crowd, right? Like, as far as like just wrestling and getting in and physical and stuff like that, it's not grandiose enough for like a large for a full arena. But like, that's kind of some of the stuff that I love the most. So like, in figuring out how to wrestle in front of no people wasn't that hard, because I've actually wrestled in front of no people when we wanted there to be people there. So yeah, like so I've really enjoyed it, and like, and it's fun too, because the further the pandemic's gone along, the like things have changed and evolved. So we're constantly getting put into like new situations. Like the Thunderdome is super cool and different from the Performance Center where there's no people. Then they had a few people at the Performance Center. Then we're at like a Thunderdome with like fan screens and all that kind of stuff. So the environment in which we're performing is constantly changing, which for me is like, I love that. Like, it's mental stimulation, you know, so.
Sorry, that's very unprofessional. That's my mum WhatsApping me. Cool.
Speaking of cool,
I've got my nice cool shirt on. You've got your cool haircut. I've got my mum sending me texts during the interview. Very cool. So on the topic of that feeling that you want to take everything for granted all the time, we caught you backstage at the UK tour, which was about 15 months ago now. It was, I think it was like last October or September or something. And you were saying that you were trying to take it all for granted, but also you just didn't know how long everything was going to last. Do you still feel like that, or are you more confident in your body and your longevity again now?
So I'm confident in my body and my longevity, but it's also like now my life, I've got a little bit different priorities as far as like I still love wrestling and I feel like I'll always wrestle. And as long as I can physically do it. But do I want to continue wrestling full time when like you've got 2 babies at home and like so I just say how much I love wrestling. And it is this weird part of me that like, even talking about it now, and I've been wrestling for over 20 years now, I'm like, it fills me with like this joy and it almost gives me like an energy. Like when I start thinking about stuff, I was like, ooh, I get kind of the shakes, right? And like, but now I have things in my life that I love more than wrestling that give me that give me a different feeling, but also like, okay, so like I just FaceTimed with my wife and kids, before I got here. We're here filming shows for like a week, right? And my daughter just goes like, "Daddy, can you come home now?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, sweet girl, I'll be home tomorrow." And like, and she's like, "Well, can I come see you?" And I'm like, "No." And she goes, "I miss you." It's like, oh. And it's like taking my daughter to just going on a walk with her or whatever it is where she holds my hand and that sort of thing. And like our little boy, the way, I don't know if you have kids, but parents will appreciate this because these stages don't last for a very long time. So you want to be able to appreciate it. And he's at the stage where he's just nuzzling into my neck all the time. And like, soon that's going to stop. Right. And part of me just wants to focus mostly on that because soon they're going to be in school and they're not going to want to lay on my chest and they're not going to like my daughter wants to sleep with us every night or whatever. And we don't let her sleep with us every night or even half the nights. But like sometimes I go sleep in her room and like I'm not like I'm a giant man, but like it's a tiny bed. But it's so like there's just the feeling of it is unlike anything else in the sense of like it fills you with this joy that isn't that's kind of undefinable, And so now I'm just kind of switching priorities in my life where for years wrestling has been kind of the key focus and all that kind of stuff where like my contract is coming up soon and not to say that but we're looking at transitioning me to maybe less than a full-time wrestler. Like my time of being a full-time wrestler are numbered, and I'm more going to be like full-time dad, part-time wrestler, right? Wrestling is my side job. Dadding is my most important job. So,
because I suppose with what a mental year it's been, it's the adjustment to when things kick back off and you're back on the road again, and that schedule is going to be even more of a shock for the people going back to it that are in similar situations as yourself in the roster.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be, but I think it's going to be jarring for a lot of people, and I don't think that WWE as a company is going to rush right into it because, I mean, also there's the financial aspect. How many people are going to want to go into an arena filled with people, right? Like, even after there's a vaccine, even after there's all these different things, right? So I think it's going to be a slow process to rolling back out how many days that we've been on the road. I mean, and that's not a company statement. That's just me theorizing what would happen. So.
On the still in the muzzling up stage, as you can tell by the fact that I'm still getting texts from my mum during these times, it can last much longer than you think,
Yeah. I hope so. And especially with my daughter, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, she's at a point where she still loves being held and all that kind of stuff. But it's funny because like, I consider myself like for a normal human being, I'm pretty strong, right? But it's like, oh my gosh, if she gets too much bigger, this is gonna start to be like real work. So.
You mentioned there about maybe transitioning a little bit more part-time, and a lot of what we see with you is how much you enjoy new challenges and working with new guys. And so much of what we saw with Gulak recently was like, this is you giving him the opportunity to work his style and really come out of his shell. Do you see your future being more of that?
So yeah, so you would think that like, okay, this is me giving Gulak an opportunity to, show his thing. And it kind of is, but that wasn't even my thing. I've always, I don't want to say always, but when I was introduced to Drew Gulak on the independents, somebody said like, hey man, you'll really like this guy, Drew Gulak, the way that he wrestles and all that kind of stuff. I was like, whoa, like he's great, right? At this certain style that I love. So part of wanting to do these matches with Drew Gulak and wanting to do like him be my trainer and all that kind of stuff was just selfish, right? Like some things, gosh, I forget what it's. Ayn Rand, who I don't agree with most of her philosophy, she wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, which I read when I was in high school, and I was like, this is appalling. But I like the phrase, the virtue of selfishness, because sometimes it seems like, oh, you're doing this good thing for this other person, when really in the back of your mind, you're just doing it, well, secretly, I really enjoy it. So it's like I'm doing it, yeah, to help Drew, but also because I love wrestling that style, and it's just something completely different. So, I mean, but like that's one of the things that I would like to shine a light on, is the guys that might be underutilized, that have like, they might not be stereotypical WWE superstars, or compete in a way, perform in a way that WWE is like, okay, this is what works. Drew Gulak doesn't wrestle in the normal style of WWE, but what he does is really cool, and if you highlight it, it can be a cool part of the WWE presentation. And so that's one of my, I don't even want to say one of my aims. That's just something that I kind of enjoy doing.
Who do you feel like has taken this year as an opportunity to, like Drew Gulak, kind of just come out their shell and have a massive breakout year?
Yeah, it's hard because like Drew McIntyre's obviously gone next level this year, and so that's the person I think of most. I think the women have done, specifically the women on SmackDown, have done a great job as far as like doing that. Like all the stuff with like Bayley and Sasha has really like connected really well in this empty arena setting where it's hard to connect. And Roman Reigns right now, as much as you might like him or dislike him, he's completely changed how he looks and feels on the show. The breakout person for me on SmackDown, who's like completely elevated his game and all that kind of stuff, to me is Jey Uso. Like he's done such a great job, whether I like him or dislike him. He's elevated his game to a new level. But I mean, we have so many talented people who are adjusting to this period. So those are just a few names off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's funny you say Bayley, because I feel like Bayley was one of the people that adapted who she was first for that quiet, well, no audience.
Yeah.
She found that quiet environment and kind of like upped the trash talk game and upped different parts of her personality. And now,
yeah,
you see Roman doing similar, right?
And Roman's taken an approach that nobody else thought of taking, which like, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of like the technical details of whatever it is that we do, but like he's taken a completely almost like movie-esque style quality to his character. And it's and I think it's really fun to watch.
Another thing I was thinking about when I was watching on Sunday night was Talking Smack. I got reminded of Talking Smack segments, and you obviously flourished in your time on Talking Smack with Renee Young back in the day. All you wanted all along was to go back and be a wrestler again. But were you really enjoying the time there? Because it was like you just had no weight on your shoulders. You were just having fun and taking a piss, enjoying yourself, right?
So yeah, like and the Talking Smack was fun. One, because Renee Young is very good in that role. Like, if you were just to put me on like with anybody else, Renee is such a good so good at guiding you and keeping things on track. If it would have been me and somebody else, it would have gone off the rails real quick. But she's so talented, you know? And so anyways, yeah, it was enjoyable, but there were also parts of it that I got really frustrated with because like there would be times that I wouldn't be on SmackDown and they knew I wasn't going to be on SmackDown. I was the GM and whatever. And they'd still have me travel and go to the show to just do Talking Smack. And it was really hard on me because like watching other people wrestle, and I wasn't necessarily helping other people now. If I was more in like if I had changed my mindset at the time, and my mindset, I have to admit, was very poor. It was like very focused on like, I'm going to wrestle again. I want to wrestle again. As opposed to like, hey, maybe I could take this time to like learn other aspects of the business and like help other people and all that kind of stuff. If I had taken that mindset, it would have been different. But at that time, I was very much like, man, if I'm not going to be able to wrestle and I'm not a part of the show, like don't fly me in just to do Talking Smack, right? Like I'd rather be home with my wife and baby, you know? And so it was just like I had a very negative mindset towards those kind of like times. But then almost every time, like I would have a negative mindset going in, but then every time when I was doing Talking Smack, I'd have so much fun. And so it was just like, and I mean, we could like, sometimes it was just like, there's no script. It's just me and Renee and the talent riffing. And I think that's a lot of fun for me because then you get to see like our talent, like they're great personalities, you know what I mean? And just funny things ended up happening a lot that nobody could have planned. And so, yeah, it was a great time. I feel like I thrive sometimes in like chaotic atmospheres where anything can happen.
It also allowed other people to thrive though, because you think like Miz used it as a launching pad to basically almost entirely reinvent himself as you know, he'd maybe sort of meandered off the trail a little bit, and then he came back and did the stuff with you on Talking Smack, and all of a sudden he was a serious guy again. And I think now at the moment you see Paul Heyman and Kevin Owens on there, and it's become like a launching pad for the story.
Yeah. So what I think it really speaks to is an individual talent's ability to just connect with something that's entirely their own, right? That like maybe management isn't thinking or whatever it is, but they have something in their head, or they have a frustration in their head, or they have something, and they can just say, you know what, this and this and this and this, and like that was one of the cool parts about Talking Smack is that happening. And I also think like Paul Heyman specifically he understands his role. I tried to understand my role too there in that you need to let the superstars be superstars, right? Like you're not the focal point, right? Let them say what they want to say or need to say to become more of a superstar. And I think it's a great launching pad for that. And I think talent that can really go in on Talking Smack and deliver, they show the whole WWE universe. They show a different side of their personality. And sometimes it takes you back and goes, whoa. Like I thought Big E did that in one of the first new launches of Talking Smack. Like Big E's an eloquent human being, and he can be funny, but he can also like stare you dead in the eyes and say like, hey, I know what I want in this life, and I know who I am, and say it so succinctly that you just like, whoa. And Big E's like, because he jokes so much, sometimes you're like, oh, he's funny. But when you see him, like we're around him all the time, and it never doesn't shock me when I see Big E. I'm just like, oh my gosh, he's so scary. Like, like I would never want to fight Big E, and like he's a state champion wrestler and stuff like that. So it's like it's also like, yeah, he's really nice and he smiles and all that kind of stuff. But like if you were to get him mad, like, oh my gosh, how terrifying, you know? So.
How close to the top is Big E? Because obviously he's on his solo run now, and he was already popular. He was already charismatic, like you said. Now he's just got to embrace the scariness, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, so he has to do it his own way. You know what I mean? Like he's like, he said on that edition of Talking Smack, one of the things that is he's like, me just being a monster, just me being being intense all the time, like, cause like that's not him. He said, and he said I tried doing that, and 6 years ago, and nobody cared, right? But he's legitimately a funny guy who can turn to being scary like that. And I think that there's something to that. And especially in this generation of like people have shorter attention spans and all that kind of stuff. You need fun and you need funny. And then to be able to flip that switch and just be like, okay, now we're not playing games anymore. I think he has that more so than 99% of people doing what we do. So yeah, I think he's pretty great.
Obviously, he's left the New Day now, and New Day involves Kofi Kingston, a man who you had one of my favorite ever WrestleMania moments with.
What? What are you talking about? Why is that one of your favorite WrestleMania moments?
Because
me losing?
I loved your ring walk, and I loved the belt, and everything else was a disaster.
Me losing? And do you know what? Do you know who else that was bad for? Cows, right? Because my championship was made entirely of hemp and naturally fallen oak and that sort of thing. And then now we've got back this leather championship. I mean, we're past that, people. Come on, we don't need to be killing animals for leather just for fashion or because it used to be something that's considered like a status symbol or whatever. Oh, this is a nice belt because it's leather. Do you know what? The faux leather materials right now are so awesome looking that, and I mean, like, I'm not a fashion guy, obviously, but my wife really likes, I think it's the Stella McCartney brand, which is like that high-end, like, there's those high-end brands that people like Gucci or Louis Vuitton. I mean, I'm not down with, I don't know.
It rings a bell.
That kind of stuff. But there's like a vegan version of it that's like, and it looks so cool to me. And like, hey, if you can look cool and you didn't harm any animals, any sentient beings, any sentient beings that have feelings, how cool is that? And now here you are telling me that was one of your favorite moments. But how bad is that for all these sentient beings on the planet?
It was a platform for the belt, for the message.
Oh.
And also the match happened.
Yeah, and the match, yeah.
Which was, feel good for other people,
feels good for everybody but me. But I will say this, having won matches at WrestleMania, and having lost matches at WrestleMania, Kofi winning the championship, like, and WrestleMania is a long show. You don't go back to the hotel till late at night, and then you have to be up at like 4:30, 5:30 in the morning to go do media and all this different kinds of stuff. I lost. So in the back of my mind, well, even if I lost, you know what, Kofi, he has to get up early, and I'm sleeping in. So, duh.
How was it comparing it to your moment? You obviously had that sort of underdog story where you had everyone on your side, and then the next time everyone was against you. What was it like, sort of being in the middle of that and comparing the two?
So it's interesting because I've always, it's most of my time in WWE has been as somebody who gets cheered, right? But I wrestled for 10 years before that. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed is getting food. Like, it's so much fun. And it's just like, and so it was really fun for me. Actually, that moment for me, despite the losing, my daughter was there and at an age where she could understand, and I got to come back from the match, and like, she's there, and like, she just gives me this big hug, and then my wife's there, and like, all that kind of stuff, and like, it was it felt really good, and in a lot of ways, and especially so, I've mentioned this to different people before, but WrestleMania 30, where I was the good guy and got all the cheers, has kind of a weird place in my mind, as far as like, some people like, man, that must have been awesome, but it's tied into so many different emotions too, because it's like, so main evented WrestleMania 30, that following Friday, my wife and I get married, great, like, then shortly a couple days later, or after WrestleMania 30, the Ultimate Warrior died, which was, just sad for a lot of us. But then my wife and I go on our honeymoon, and it's like the greatest between WrestleMania and our honeymoon is like the greatest week of my life. We get back, we're in Baltimore, and I wake up on the Monday morning and to find out that my dad had died, and like unexpectedly at 57. And then Connor, who's the inspiration for Connor's Cure, dies on the Wednesday. And so it was this weird, and then it almost started like a weird downward spiral for me. I needed like neck surgery shortly after and all that kind of stuff. So my memories of WrestleMania 30 are like yeah, it's cool and there's these cool moments in it, but it's not like pure joy. It also reminds me of these like really sad and great moments, you know, so it's weird. Whereas WrestleMania 35, I think it was, with Kofi, like other than losing the championship, which I'm still angry about, is like there's just pure joy there. There's nothing, there's no connection to something negative. And especially that I had come back at WrestleMania 34, and then a year later, I'm doing that. Felt like in my heart, it made me feel happy. And then having my wife there, my daughter there, like all that kind of stuff, like it was a real special thing for me personally, you know.
How much pressure did you feel in that match as well to sort of deliver that moment for Kofi?
Oh, I didn't feel any pressure. I also like, especially, so where you really feel pressure on those WrestleManias and even like the big shows and the Royal Rumbles is if you're on late in the show, right? So it's like a 4 or 5 or 6 hour show or whatever it is, and they've seen so much, and then like at the end it's like, okay, now we have to deliver a special moment. We were midway through the show, and like I knew if Kofi and I go out there and perform at the level that we normally perform at, just our average performance, it's going to be great. But I think we delivered above that. Like I brought all the intensity and I put everything I could into that match, and Kofi clearly did the same. And so yeah, so like I've gotten past the point a lot of times where I feel pressure for stuff. Like I approach this. It was interesting when I started wrestling, because I was trained by Shawn Michaels, and he said, you know, the moment that you stop getting butterflies before you go out there, that's when you need to retire. And I find since I've come back from my retirement, I very rarely get that feeling of nervousness. I get more of the feeling like there's this cool feeling, and I guess it's more like excitement. But if you pay attention, if you were to just close your eyes and eliminate the thoughts in your mind and just pay attention to this feeling, there's just like this cool energy that you don't get anytime else. And when it's a big match like that, and you know these people are like going crazy for Kofi, it amplifies that energy to where it almost feels like it's like your body's energy is expanding outside of yourself, and it's just like, whoa, this is going to be so rad. And like that's the feeling that I got in that Kofi match. I remember, and I'm sitting there, I'm in Gorilla right before I'm about to go out, and I remember and people are going crazy for Kofi as he comes out, and I remember just sitting there, or not sitting, but I'm standing there about to go out, and you just get this feeling like my body becomes the size of Brock Lesnar as far as like energy wise, you know what I mean? And it's just it could fill a whole room, you know what I mean? It's just like, whoa, what an incredible life this is, So yeah.
And we're approaching that sort of season again now. The advert started at the pay-per-view on Sunday. They had Auld Lang Syne going with a kind of like acoustic version. The Royal Rumble advert, WrestleMania season, the talk started. What kind of goals are you going to set yourself going into this year? Are there any kind of like dream matches or sort of big moments you want to have?
So it's interesting. Gosh, I mean, the one thing, I've never won a battle royal in my entire life, right? Never. And I've had some weird moments in Royal Rumbles in the past. I would just call them weird. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. But I've just had some weird Royal Rumble moments, and like my entire career, I've never won a battle royal, or obviously not a Royal Rumble either. And like part of my thing is, okay, we're coming up on this. I'm coming up on kind of the end of my full-time wrestler thing. I would love for like one time to really get in there and at least get close. You know what I mean? The closest I ever came was the first show that we did in Saudi Arabia, and I was in there for like, I forget how long.
Yeah, it was the 50-man one, wasn't it? You were in there for about 4 days.
Yeah. And I was in there forever, and then not getting it. I think like this year, that's going to be like one of my main focuses. If I could do that, that would just be kind of really cool. And the other thing is so really focus. I feel like, so to me, professional wrestling is a martial art. And in the sense of, if MMA is the most martial part of martial arts, where it's like real fighting, but what we do is the more artistic side. And one of the things that I've always loved about martial arts since I was a kid is this idea of self-development. And through martial arts, you can see aspects of your character that need to improve just in your life. And I find that especially true with what we do. So like, whether it be physically, like, okay, I'm losing athletic ability. I've just noticed this in the last year, which makes me really mad at AJ Styles because he's older than me and he's still so athletic. If you saw his match at TLC, I'm just like, AJ, how are you able to do this? Like, it makes me mad. So, anyway, so I'm losing athletic ability, and I still train really hard. Okay. Like, I can work on certain things and whatever it is, but being aware of that, and what does that mean for me as a performer standpoint? What do I need to change and improve on in other aspects? And then as I train, like, how do I do that? My mental energy when I come to a match, what does that need to be now? It's like, okay, if I got just in thinking about it, you can, or in the way that you talk and deliver performances, because like spoken word has always been hard for me from the time I was like a kid, like to the point where I had to read my essay in front of the class, and I just couldn't do it. Like, I started stuttering. I got 3 sentences out, stuttering, stammering, and then just the teacher just let me sit back down. And what we do, WWE, pro wrestling, forces you out of those comfort zones and forces you to grow as a human being. And rather than saying like, oh, I can't do this. So rather than say like, hey, I can't do these things that I'm used to doing in wrestling, so I should just stop wrestling. Seeing it as a growth mindset where you're like, well, I can't do this, but what can I do? And allowing your mind to just kind of expand with that. Like, just the concept of that really fills me with joy and gives me a little bit of energy and all that kind of stuff. So those are the things that I'm looking at. That's a more, sorry if that was a little too out there for, not like, I want to wrestle Seth Rollins, you know what I
mean? So who is there left on the roster that you think you can get the best out of that with, if you know what I mean? So someone that you're almost still learning something from and doing something new with.
Well, so it's interesting because I feel like I learn something new with everybody, and just even with different circumstances. But like somebody, and I don't know, he may know if we ever wrestled on the independent. I forget, like a lot of people I've actually wrestled like on the independents. Like somebody just brought this up to me. So there's Shane Thorne. I wrestled him apparently in Australia, and then saw him 4 times after that. And every time I introduced myself, I said, oh, hi, I'm Bryan. He goes, yeah, we wrestled before. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And the next time it's the same thing. It wasn't even a joke. I just like didn't remember, you know? And so it's like, but one person that I like, just because he can do so many incredible things that I'd like to wrestle is Ricochet. Same thing with like Apollo Crews. Like, I think Apollo Crews is infinitely talented. And one of the guys who I'd really like to have like a real, like something where we can get stuck in with that I've never had the opportunity to do is Shinsuke Nakamura. So like there's those kinds of things. There's any young talent, any new challenges. I mean, I would love, we've had matches here in WWE, but we've never had like one that's like really built into a big match is Seth Rollins. You know, I'd love, just because he was a hero of mine, I'd love to do a match with Rey Mysterio. You know, I'd love to work with his son. You know what I mean? Like, one of the cool things, this might not relate to English viewers, but as a kid, I was a huge Seattle Mariners fan, and our biggest star was Ken Griffey Jr. And the Seattle Mariners signed his father, Ken Griffey Sr. And I remember that made me like a bigger fan of just the Mariners and baseball. And then there was one game where they hit back-to-back home runs, and like it just makes you feel good. I feel that same way with like Ray and Dominic. You know what I mean? And so like, I'd love to wrestle Dominic and that sort of thing. So there's all sorts of people. Like, there's a never ending list. You could give me pretty much any name, other than somebody who's going to slam me a bunch from high places. If somebody's going to slam me a bunch from high places, I'm like, I might not be into that, you know, like, but other than that, like, I'm pretty much excited to wrestle everybody.
Okay, Daniel. Well, it's been absolutely unbelievable to talk to you. And I mean, from the kid who couldn't read out his essays in his classes to the Dazzler, you know.
Yeah.
The biggest transformation of all, becoming the Dazzler.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I have all these weird things that Chad Gable. Gosh, I would love to do something with Chad Gable. I just, you know, I can't. The only reason I remember that is because we just did the kickoff show match at TLC. It was me, Big E, Otis, and Chad Gable, and I was trying to get all of us to do. I don't know if this is a thing in England, but there was this show called The Three Amigos. It was a movie with like Steve Martin and all that kind of stuff, and they do this cool little dance where it goes like, huh, 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 huh. They turn their head to the side and then they thrust their hips. And I was like, hey guys, we should do the Three Amigos dance. And everybody's like, no, you're not cool. And I'm like, oh.
But you got the hair.
Yeah. So yeah, from going to not being able to read an essay in front of 20 kids and to trying to convince grown men to do the Three Amigos dance, I feel like I've come a long way.
Incredible. Thank you so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.